Hello, and welcome to the Tillman Battleships. Keyship Series 2 ship, or Part 8, Ship 10 I think, because I did a couple of doubles. I confuse myself at certain points with a numbering scheme. I really do. Anyway, alright, let's see what we've got. We have, if I move this out the way quickly, so that this lovely thing out the way. What should we do? Let's make it disappear. We can see the whole of Jack Wardley's most recent comment. How come the Tillman 15 18-inch guns weighing 80,000 tons with all that speed too must sacrifice a lot of important things to stay at that weight? Would have thought it would weigh around 130,000 tons plus the good stuff added onto it. Well, there's two reasons for its weighing it like it is. First off, it's 15 18-inch guns, and the 50 cal 18-inch guns in 5 triple turrets, and this is Tillman 4-2. Tillman 4-1 had 13 18-inch guns. It has a top speed of 25.2 knots. So planned in 1917, that's not that fast. If you're thinking about small troop boys, etc., 25 knots is viable. You've got a displacement of 72,600 tons, or 80,000 short tons. But the armour is between 8 and 16 inches thick. The barbette armour is between 5 and 15 inches thick, and the conning tower is 6 to 18 inches thick. So, you know, there are savings going on. I'd also add that with the Tillman designs, this one is supposed to be 297 meters long, 33 meters beam, and 10 meters draft. So she is long. She is long. That does help. Put in context, Hood herself HMS Hood is 262.3 meters long. So the Tillman would have been, well, about 35 meters longer, roughly. 36.8 meters to be precise, but, you know, 0.2 of a meter between friends, surely that can be excused. If we consider the G3s and their size, they were going to be 260.9 meters long. So she would have been 36.1 meters longer. And when it comes to beam, well, the G3s, 32.3 meters. Hood was 31.7 meters. 33 meters. So that all adds up to a lot of space and a lot of ability to deal with displacement issues. Now, thinking it would displace around 130,000 tons is if you're thinking about it actually being able to do faster than 25 knots, because 25 knots by this point is a fairly doable speed. It's not going to require that much. And if it was going to be, well, you notice one of the things that I always find fun when we look at the designs, and if I skip through to the designs, look at the design and then tell me what's missing from this design. You can see some secondary emplacements and arcs of them, and arcs of fire as secondaries, but there aren't that many. This is the Tillman Battleship 1. I think if we go through to, I think I've got number 4 in here. There's that. That's 80,000 ton Battleship 4. Ah yes, Tillman 4. I think this is the one with the 24 16-inch guns. Because why have less? That was supposed to be able to also do a speed of 25.2 knots. That would have been a truly interesting development. And then there's the 4-2, which has the 5 turrets that give it, I think that's the 15 18-inch guns. and 21 6-inch guns. If you look at the armour, she has thick armour, but also look at where it covers exactly. In some regards, these battleships, if we go back through these designs, the arm belt is rather narrow, one might say, for a battleship. It's viable, but there are ways they're achieving what they're claiming. And it is sacrifices. But is it a viable sacrifice? Let's be honest. If the Americans did produce something which had 15, 18-inch guns, that would be a very big statement on the world affairs. Capable of doing 25 knots? Any battleship which was slower than it would at that point be out of service, because that's a lot of firepower. Jack Wardley. I'd like to know who came up with the design for 6 barrels in one turret, and how on earth you would be able to fit that on a ship with a 108-foot beam. It was going to be complicated and tight. Also, as said, the rule of thumb, which I use, is 1 gun is X problems. 2 guns. That's more. That's 3X problems. 3 guns. Probably 5X problems. You could argue 6. 8 times the problems. You really want to work out how many problems? So, it's a case of this is not good. This is just not good. Because you have to deal with also the relationship between the guns. And the tighter that relationship is, they're not good. Jack Wardley. The US Navy can't get a 110,000 ton carrier through the Panama. That's because the 110,000 ton carriers are not designed to fit exactly into a Panama lock gate. That's what the design requirements on this. All these ships have the same length, same beam, same draft to exactly fit through the locks. I guess something like a 12 triple 20-inch high caliber super heavy shell gun will be the maximum. Maybe even a 16 quad 20-inch high cal super caliber. I don't think you would. Let's put it this way: if you're going for a 20-inch gun and you're firing super heavy shells of the type that you would need to qualify as super heavy shells, that's okay. I find myself doing the same hand gesture as I did the previous time I recorded this. So I'm sorry, I must be automatically associating this sort of hand gesture where this hand is down lower here, so like I'm holding a 20-inch shell, and I definitely couldn't fit one in this space. The sheer mechanism and the weights you would be lifting and moving and firing if you had explosives. Remember, the greatest fear for everyone was if you fired a shell and it failed to have enough explosive power to actually get it out of the barrel at the end. So the amount of explosive you would need to launch that shell, a 20-inch super heavy, the damage you would do to the barrel, I don't think the metallurgy could keep up with it at the time. Then you've got to have the mechanisms to load. The mechanisms to load it will all have to be so over-engineered to deal with that weight, and also deal with the potential of shock damage. I don't see it as actually happening. I've said this before, I actually see there being an upper limit on guns and shells, and yeah, they might have a couple of 20-inch gun ships wandering around for status, but honestly, I think 16.5 inch is the practical limit. Which sounds really strange to say, why is it not 16-inch, why is it 16.5? You can... 16.5 is just about big enough to count. And just not big enough for them to aim for, while still having the rate of fire and all the mechanisms and those things within the acceptable degrees of metallurgical capabilities. It's just... Aye. Oh well. Figure 59. Pitchfork. Benjamin Tillman was from my state in the USA, and he was a abhorrent individual. Yes. By God, the designs of battleships that his particular brand of insanity created still tickle me somewhat. Yeah, that's the thing. As I said in the video about him in this discussion, Tillman is not a nice person, and I am not getting into a discussion of his politics because I will then spend a lot of my time ranting about the stupidity and illogicalness of the politics. But, yes. He does have an interesting desire for battleships. And Cox, I think I'll put up a Patreon subject. What happens to the Washington Treaty if Tillman is still alive? I don't think you've ever put that up, Andrew. I would love to have seen that, because I'd love to have answered that one, because I think Tillman could have had an interesting scenario. I also think there's an interesting case that if Tillman's involved in the treaty process in any way, shape or form, he likes spending money on ships, and he doesn't want shipbuilding to finish. So whilst he'd want a limit on ships, he wouldn't want the stop of the building to finish. Because as I put it quite succinctly, he wanted to get that money for his state. That was helping him build up his state. He wanted that money for his state. Charleston Shipyard would have got orders, and he would have made sure it was getting orders. So, cruisers and battleships and everything that could be built in that yard would be built in that yard. So I don't think he would get a building holiday. I think he might get that. I think he'd probably still get a caps, but I don't think you get necessarily the same building holiday. I just don't think so. I don't think it would happen. Yeah, okay, that's good. Sorry. My mum texted me. Assuming Tillman Free is laid down in 1917 or 18. Okay. That's the 57,600 ton, 30 knot, 12, 16-inch gun vessel. Yes. The Japanese government is going to have interesting financial difficulties in a few years catching up. The British government is going to be annoyed, as it would likely would like to pay the war debt off quicker. However, there are 2 or 3 reasons once I can see the iron. The iron already has an 18-inch gun development, so we get the Super Narod or Super G3 with triple 18-inch guns at 30 knots, or we get a QE layout with 8 18-inch guns. The alternate is you strap a lot of triples and find a Q turret for a 15-inch production line, and it all gets hilarious. I would say, Verdun, I can see where you're going, but I can see, honestly, the Royal Navy not deviating from its G3s and N3s if that's what the Americans are building. It'll build them, and then by the time that vessel gets in service, which, let's be honest, if it starts in 1917, will be about 1920, 1921. So, actually, no, it's not even the G3s or the N3s, it's a case of the Admirals are what are under construction at that time. The Admirals don't really stand much against a Tillman Free because it's a 30-knot vessel. Yes, they're faster, but they're not really fast enough, and it's got 12, 16-inch guns, and it's all got all that tonnage. So, yeah, the British probably go with something like a G3 a lot quicker. They have a 16.5-inch gun they can go for already. So they could just try and race a 16.5-inch gunship into service, which how much is it? 12 16-inch guns, 12 16.5-inch guns. It's a case of the British might do that. Yes, they're still fighting a war in 1917, but they're still still Britain Royal Navy. But if it's laid down in 1917, if it's laid down in 1918. Then you probably get a similar scenario going on. It's just that instead of them waiting until about the time they do to order the G3s, they order something earlier up that schedule and that timeline. And if we consider some of the earlier designs, which I did show off, discuss in the G3 video, some of those are 1918 designs. I could see K or L's being ordered, and the Royal Navy might adapt those. So I think I said before, these sorts of what happens with big ships. I think most likely the way it goes, we get an era where where until you get another leap in tech, as we are reaching the limits of gun size and cost, you have the Tillman 3s and 18-inch gun ships floating around at first rates. However, they are so expensive, the default third rate 74 gun equivalent is basically an R or G3. Again, G3s have 16.5-inch guns. I know there are a lot of people and a lot of sources which do point to them saying they're 16-inch guns in secondary sources. But when you go and read the primary sources and you go and read the earliest and oldest books, they're 16.5-inch guns. And I think one of the perceptions is that they've got to be 16-inch guns because that's the Washington Treaty, and that's the treaty limit, and that's what the Americans have, and so that's what British have been building. But if you think about it, the British go up in 1.5-inch increments, right? So if you think about it, it goes 12-inch, 13.5-inch, 13.5-inch, 15-inch. Next stop is not 16-inch, it's 16.5-inch. So 16.5-inch does fit with the British desires. And the other gun they were sort of looking at they'd been looking at earlier was the 18-inch. So they've gone down 1.5 inches from that and 1.5 inches up from the 15-inch, and they have a 16.5-inch gun under progress and under development. So it fits with that far more than 16-inch does. The Americans work in 2-inch increments. The French do whatever the French do. The Germans tend to react to the British, hence they do a 1-inch jump and then a 3-inch jump, and then it'll go all over the place. Someone the other day was writing in the comments that was actually the German, desire with their battle cruisers and things, and I was just, no. The Germans are just broken, okay? At certain points, the German design and construction process in World War I, especially after the fall of both Tirpitz and Holzendorf, both of them gone. The German design and construction and the teams entirely focusing on development of battleships and battlecruisers is just broken beyond belief. Those two had been the two important figureheads which have been providing the structure that they've been built around, and the political overview. Once you have them go, you have far too many people claiming to be a chef in the kitchen. Two of them being able to take a Tillman 3 or an Elm 3 Super Rod Null out. Probably, but yeah, to be fair, it's not that difficult for them to do that. If there is a treaty, because everyone says this is getting silly as displacement limits, where they are as the Tillman is the new default. This probably means that you end up with 17,000 tons cruisers with 12-inch guns, USS Midway or current USS Queen Elizabeth sized carrier conversion in the 1920s. Who knows what the effects on naval aviation? Mosquito-type planes performing carrier strike role in the 1940s. Distinct possibility, and jets could fly off carriers early, perhaps. True. I would say the biggest thing you get, if you have larger tonnages, and we've talked about this on this channel a few times, larger tonnages in terms of the Washington and London naval treaties, especially individual tonnages but also cumulative tonnages, make the tasks for Germany even more difficult. I.e., it's one thing to go from to build a Deutschen class, then build a Scharnhorst, then build a Bismarck. You're slowly building up your capabilities. But Bismarck is built with the idea of it being more powerful and more capable. It isn't, but it's tried to be built, to be German engineered perfect to fight other things. Well, if you're dealing with the fact that the British have a battle fleet which is going to be a lot younger, a lot larger, a lot more armoured, a lot more faster, and having a lot bigger guns, you've got a problem. If you're dealing with a Royal Navy where basically the entry gun is a 16.5-inch gun, and there are some 18-inch gun vessels wandering around, then you're in trouble. If you're dealing with a Royal Navy where they've got 17,000-ton cruisers with 12-inch guns wandering around, and you're allowed 10,000 tons for your Deutschland class before you, because of the treaty limits that are imposed by Versailles, and I don't see those changing because the Royal Navy specifically set out, and Britain specifically set out, to impose those treaty limits in Versailles. Britain doesn't really give a flying hoot about much of the treaty, apart from when it comes to dealing with the German maritime and naval infrastructure, in which case the Royal Navy, Britain plays hard ball like anything, and sets out to destroy it. So, at that point, and that will do you even build a Deutschland class? After all, if we can look at them and you go, well, yes, and then the equivalent county class cruiser of its era is four triple 12-inch turrets with, well, a good 8 inches of belt armor, and capable of 33, 34, well, maybe 36 knots even in that scenario, and, you know, weighing in about 15 to 18,000 tons. You don't want to... Deutschland doesn't even feature in that scenario. It just doesn't. It changes a lot of things very quickly. Curly 31 GB. No dry dock in Utah? No problem. Naval guns don't need a dry dock. That's what trains are for. Just Camp. Fantastic point regarding the fact that motivation is relevant to the work being performed. Too many times, Tillman and the ships are treated by historians as a joke or funny byline, when in reality they're a fascinating insight into the thoughts and capabilities of American shipbuilders in the era, both the sensible and the foolish. Yes, very much. They have a lot of good ideas, and it's still worthwhile looking at them. And they have a lot of crazy ideas, which are still worthwhile learning from. Because sometimes a crazy idea today can be an interesting idea, it can be a useful idea, you know, interesting idea tomorrow, useful idea in a century's time, and the norm in 2 centuries' time. It's worthwhile considering these things. It's like when we talk about the sextuple gun system. Theoretically, it's an incredibly efficient firing system because you literally have to work out the angle and aiming for one turret. One turret. And then you fire 6 shells. You fire the entire broadside of Renown class. So you can actually do salvo firing of 3 guns from each individual turret. It's theoretically a great idea. But in practice, metallurgical-wise and infrastructure and engineering-wise, etc., it's a terrible idea. At the moment. At the moment. If the USN builds 39 battleships, I think there is a case for deferring or cancelling building a battlecruiser class. Meanwhile, the Japanese may be having a fit. I think potentially the admirals do get completely cancelled. Or might get turned into aircraft carriers. That was something the Royal Navy, as said, I've said I'm fairly certain the Royal Navy were working on that one because of Camel Laird's and their archives in the Royal Archives Centre. But leaving that to one side, I think what would most likely happen is the Royal Navy would take some of the fast battleship designs from their Alphabet Soup series, as I like to call them, and be churning them out quickly. Possibly taking less notice of the infrastructure limitations, and probably having a long conversation with the government about, we will need to do some work on some dry docks. Why? That! Which the government will go, yeah, bloomin' Americans. How much? Where's the checkbook? Sell some more bonds. No, it has. And 2 inches of armour. The South Dakotas have 15-inch, or was it 6-inch? Meh. Instead of the Tillman's 13 inches. But fair enough. Add 2 inches. Add the 2 inches, and the Tillman 3 would probably still be at least 26, 28 knots. Things add 2 inches. And you're probably right. Turning 3434. For sure, Tillman 3's had to sacrifice on torpedo protection to run such a heavily armed 30-knot ship with 20 technology, not? That was one of the key benefits of standards. Good 5-layered torpedo protection, and one of the struggles in the design of Lexington battlecruisers. Well, if I just take this lovely slides and I expand them a bit, you can see some of the torpedo defences. You can see the lines of torpedo defences and sloped armour. And so, yeah, I think they probably don't have necessarily as good as we might dream of them having, but I think they have something. They certainly have something. Battleship that costs that much and that much displacement with an insufficient torpedo belt is asking for trouble. Big risk to place such investment, especially if it were to serve on to World War II afterwards. Probably would do. And yeah, if Tillman 3 gets built and is rocking around at 30 knots, and G3 is too weak to fight and probably not fast enough to run, then I think Brits will settle for that. Andrew knows, rather than G3, N3 designs would merely be an equivalent competitor, and the British wouldn't be satisfied with that. I don't. In the nicest way, you're looking at the timeline wrong, because we're talking about 1917, 1918. So we're talking about the generation after the Admiral class, sort of the beginning of the alphabet soup, that eventually leads to the G3s. So yeah, you would be dealing with something slightly different than that. Let's see, from Arian Contreras. South Dakota in Tillman world would be 50 to 55,000 tons. So I think we'd go 25 knots and somewhat more armour. Potentially. Kingsrook. I'm in the middle of catching up on live streams, so I've heard your turret problem analogy a number of times recently, and I have to disagree with it. In my mind, having a twin turret causes 3 times the problems of a single gun turret. The problem of gun 1, well, yeah, you have... As I said, I've tried to adapt it recently, and that's why you heard the version earlier, but it usually be sort of 2, then 3 guns is 4 times the problem, 4 guns is 8 times the problem, sort of thing, but yeah, it still roughly fits in with that sort of scenario. In my mind, having a twin turret causes 3 times the problems of a single gun turret. The problems of gun 1, the problems of gun 2, and the problems of both combined. A triple is 7 times a single gun, 1 to, on all rations. Basically 2 to n plus problems. You're trying to make a rule of thumb precise, and that's where you run into trouble, because how about if a turret's guns are independent of each other's, but is actuated by the same mechanism? What happens if they have separate ammunition supplies versus joined? Impact of breech design, emplacement, orientation? I say all this because whilst you have a case, and that is a road to trying to build and articulate a provable mathematical formula, what I use it for is a rough and ready example rule of thumb to help listeners put it together in their heads. And that's the thing. The moment you start going down a very precise formula, you have to make it precise and to account for all the things. Because people go, well, it's not precise because it doesn't account for this and doesn't account for that. So, rule of thumb, trick for rule of thumb is to keep it loose, very loose. It's a guide. It's not a law of physics. Happened. You lose Tillman, you lose 20 years. Raffninger. I'm probably on a completely wrong track, but here's my take on the question. My first thought is that these things are spanning the works of 2 things. The first in the Nagato class. Japan is going to have an aneurysm when they find out about them, and if they're laid down in 1916 like Tennessee class, then Japan is probably going to cancel Nagato class outright and go straight to something along the lines of number 13 class. Second is Lexington class. Either the US Navy is going to triple down on the original 35 knot speed to justify them, somehow try to push them even faster, or they're going to abandon battlecruiser outright. This also means America never gets Lexington class carriers. It also is going to affect the treaties. Everyone is going to demand the right to build counters. If 6 ships are built, Japan might be able to get a 3-2 ratio instead of 5-3, and the original number of 15 is kept, then they'd end up with 10 capital ships. Whether they keep all 4 Congos with intention of modernising them later on to keep up the number 13s, or to keep 2 with the intention of scrapping them, then insert, so they can replace them, I don't know. Alternatively, the treaties might happen sooner, perhaps even during the Versailles negotiations, and a 5-3 ratio is kept. I don't think it'll be a 5-3 ratio, because in the Versailles Treaty, and I have a reason for this, Japan was actually in a stronger place in the Versailles Treaty than they were in the Washington Naval Treaty. In the Versailles Treaty, the Americans weren't able to do as much of an intelligence gathering operation on the Japanese and the other groups as they were in Washington, and also, in a nicest way, the Americans called the shots to an extent in the Washington Treaty because of them being the organisers, it happening on their home turf. The Versailles Treaty, it's not. At various points, that's made painfully clear to the American negotiators when the Americans tried to change things. The Americans, remember, did not like the phrase, I want to squeeze the German orange till the pips squeak. Well, the Americans might not like that phrase. President Wilson might not have wanted that. But they had no choice. In that scenario, it is very much, I would argue, a victor's treaty. And as important as the Americans became in the end of the war in providing numbers, etc., in the last few months, the Japanese have been in the war from the beginning. They get a lot more credit and they have a lot more ground and a lot more support in that scenario than the Americans would like them to. So I don't think necessarily you get the 5-3 ratio. I think you get the 10-7 ratio. And that's probably going to end up with being 20 ship limitation in the treaty, in the Versailles. If the 5-3 ratio is kept, perhaps with America converting the 6th hull into a massive aircraft carrier, and Britain and Japan getting the opportunity to do the same with one of their response ships, assuming they've started construction. Post-built carriers would probably end up being limited to something the size of Midway class, or just as an aren't any conversions at all, and all carriers are just limited to 27,000 tons. If supercarrier route is chosen, the armoured carriers would become the norm instead of the exception, and the cruiser carrier concept with large barbettes, batteries of 8-inch guns, could stick around longer, as they'd probably be enough displacement for a useful air group, armour and guns. I don't know. No. Everyone who keeps trying to make the cruiser carrier concept as in a carrier carrying 8-inch guns a thing. Why? It's a big, relatively compared to a cruiser, unarmoured target. Why does it want to have 8-inch guns? A, that's a lot of extra top weight, and B, that's all sorts of other issues for operating your air group. And yes, you can go, well, if it gets caught by surprise. If it gets caught by surprise, you've got a problem. But also, under the Washington Treaty, and therefore theoretically under any converted, adapted Versailles Treaty, there is no cumulative limit on the number of cruisers you can build. Here's your idea. Build a cruiser to escort your carrier. And then, what can happen is if someone surprises them when they're moving along, the cruiser can go and hold them off and fight them and maybe die, but can hold them off while the carrier escapes. That's the best way. Ideally, what you want to happen is your cruiser to hold them, your carrier get far enough away, launch aircraft, and they come back and help the cruiser, and the cruiser gets away as well. And the enemy gets sunk. That's what you want, ideally. But either way, your carrier survives, and that's the important asset. That is the important asset. It would probably affect the effectiveness of aircraft carrier against battleships. 60,000-ton ships would be a lot harder for torpedo bombers to sink, if Yamato is an indication, and they could carry a lot more anti-aircraft guns. Can you imagine the number of pom-poms or both as you could fit on those suckers? Force Z might actually survive its mission. Having an aircraft carrier would make Force Z survive its mission. Repulse, having even a tad more luck than you already have, would make one of the cavalry ships survive the mission. I could see two possible effects on cruisers. The first is that the battlecruiser design gets ridiculously huge, with speeds of 35 knots minimum, a la HMS Incomparable. The second is that navies decide such massive vessel cruisers aren't worth it anymore. Instead, the battlecruiser goes away and replaced by large heavy cruisers that can bully light cruisers just fine, but are more economical to operate. So basically, what happened historically. I know how it affects Hitler's navy, but it would almost certainly be really, really impractical and really, really funny. Also a question. Are Yamato, North Carolina, South Dakota, and King George V really fast battleships? They had the same 7 knot speed disadvantage versus cruisers that World War I dreadnoughts had. Wouldn't that make them slow dreadnoughts, just updated World War II speeds, like the 21 knot dreadnought and the 27 knot battleship, versus the 18 knot pre-dreadnoughts and the Sovereigns and 21 knot armoured cruiser? Now, to a degree, you're not wrong. However, when we start classifying things as fast battleships, it's to give a designation based on their grouping, to an extent, but also it's their speed. And the fact is, some people were still talking about building relatively slow battleships in this period. So, fast battleship is something which is 28 knots or faster. Some navies are still building battleships which are sub 28 knots. And so they're traditional battleships. Fast battleships are more than 28 knots. It also is a differential when we talk about its sort of the way its internals are decided. Because battleships would have a strict honeycomb structure. And I'd often describe it as more as, instead of being a tight honeycomb, it's more of a loose honeycomb structure in a fast battleship. And then you get to a battle cruiser where it's sort of more arrangement of lozenges, and then a battle cruiser, as in two-word battle cruiser, right, the dreadnought armor cruisers, and it's far larger spaces, again, because it's about their cruising mission, and it's about habitability of crew, and the ability to store fuel and other supplies, and needing space for that. Blackburn. So, everyone panics if Tillman 3s are built. I'm guessing that the Admiral class is going to be built as a stopgap, but British are probably going to escalate to an 18-inch gunship, as they are already designing M3s and G3s. Again, it depends on when they're doing this, but if they're doing it post-World War I, yes. If they're doing it in 1970, 1918, there's a differential. Dry docks are going to be expanded, although the question of if they will still divide into battlecruiser and battleships or just skip right to fast battleships will be a question. I think the British might end up going the fast battleship route. They might end up going that. They're heading that way. You can argue they're heading that way, but they're not there. However, dry docks are definitely going to have to be expanded around the Empire to fit any future ship they come up with. I wonder if the Japanese might expand the Nagato class as a stopgap, as I think they'll probably skip the Tosan Magi class and maybe even the Ki class, going right for a number 13 class, potentially bankrupting themselves in process, especially once the Kanto earthquake happens. The French and Italians are pretty much bankrupt and will probably just look on in despair. Sometimes I doubt that the Deutschland Panzerschiff in some ways I doubt to the point Deutschland Panzerschiff gets a build with the monster ships that are likely going around. Any naval treaty will probably see cruisers in the 20,000 tons or high mark, maybe with 10-inch or even 12-inch guns. Destroyers can see a bump in tonnage too, as torpedoes are going to have to grow in size to be effective against such ships. That is a really interesting thing, because I have a sneaking suspicion about where the destroyer tonnage ends up at. In which case, something like the Daring class size from post-World War II becomes far more common far earlier. And if you look what I can put on a Daring class destroyer, and how good those things are, ooh, it changes World War II, especially if Britain has a lot of those in service, which they will do. A Tillman 3, Geoguide, would mean the British would want to have to upgrade their infrastructure to keep up with it. They would have to make a fast battleship version of the N3, skip G3 altogether, or possibly abandoning the G3 N3 turret arrangement if the dock space was no longer a factor. The Japanese would have to skip right to the Ki class at the very least. I think you're probably looking at sort of J or K or L, or something along those lines. Tindermoran, as always, very interesting. Thank you. Matthew Way. Oh my, the love child of Manifest Destiny and the insane desires of a racist senator. Oh, we'll put that as mildly. Nice one. If Tillman 3 was around, the British Empire will not have cancelled G3 and N3, and if the Americans try to call the treaty, the British Empire will simply say frigate no to any treaty proposed. Treaties won't happen. John Fisher, the Tillman 3s were built, the G3s would be even bigger to equalise the displacement of main armament. Yes, and the British Empire will pay down its debts more slowly to fund it, and the Americans can do nothing to stop them, as trying to do anything will do exactly what the doc explained a while back. We need a video on how the war debt was not the trump card that people think it is. Basically, the reason the war debt isn't a trump card that people sometimes think it is two things. One, the British were not as in debt post-World War I to the Americans as they were post-World War II. It's a different scenario. They've got other debtors around the world. Two, it only works if the Americans are prepared to step up and take over the British role. Because if the Americans aren't prepared to step up and take over the British role as world policemen, and that's what the British do exercise at this point, then the Americans are in trouble, and a lot of economic scenarios are going to suffer. Yes, America can theoretically go it alone with their own industry, internal logistics, and all those things. They can. But if you cause the world to fall into dictatorships and other scenarios as all the democracies crumble because of your actions, that's not really a good long-term scenario, because whilst you can theoretically form everything else on yourself, you're going to end up fighting a lot of wars. And that's not good. And then you have also the fact that in America you have a large pro-UK lobby. They're quieter than the pro-German and the pro-Irish, etc. lobbies. They're not talked about as much, but they're large. And they're capable. It's oh, what's it called? I've got a book about it up here. And there's one of the interesting things about it is the number of books which aren't published about it versus the others. The other lobbies get a lot of discussion. I think it's the Pilgrim Society. There's pretty much 1 or 2 books about it. And that always worries me more, because when I see a large, well-funded organization with less books written about it than others which are smaller and smaller and not as well-funded, I immediately think, oh, cute. You make sure you don't get press because you don't need it. And if you don't need press to amplify your position, you are really scary. Matthew Keeling, the concerns about an escalating naval race that created the treaty system would still be around, so the system would probably still exist. Indeed, the concerns may be magnified in some way. It would likely be with 60,000 plus ton battleships with 18-inch guns and 25,000 ton cruisers with 12-inch guns, though. Yes, which would make an even bigger target for Germany, etc., to try and climb. I'm glad it's... Dave Brennan, how silly is it going to get? Silly. Yes. They didn't get that silly. I thought I managed to keep this fairly sane. Nice. The only sane one is Tillman 3. Honestly, Tillman 3 seems like logical response to the key and number 13 class of the IJN. The Tillman 3 is actually pretty good design. If he saw Hood, he knew Hood was coming, I think. Nice. If... expect Senator Tillman forgot that being the biggest navy is not just about having the biggest ships, but being able to support that big navy and get it where it needs to be. Something that the British Empire, the dominant global power, already figured out, understood and mastered. Tillman just saw the navy asking for a bigger ship every year and said, let's just skip to the end, shall we? They were the same senators who said, you can have battleships and destroyers, but no cruiser for you. And as Josh White, there's a difference between the biggest navy and the longest reach. Yes. There are differences in all that. There are differences, but honestly, the Tillman battleships are an interesting time point to consider. They really are. There are a lot of good things to consider about them. There are a lot of interesting things to consider about them. And the fact is, he gets the Bureau of Construction and Repair to draw up these designs because he's powerful and capable enough to do so. He's able to do so because he is as powerful and influential as he is. But at the same time, if these are built, they're going to change history. And therefore they have to be considered seriously, because there was a very seriously powerful individual pushing them. Yes, we will rightly take them out of him for some of his politics and views, but he was very powerful, very influential, and very capable. And there were another number of governors, a number of other senators, and even a couple of presidents who owed their position and their status to his abilities to organize and campaign. Tillman is one of those individuals who you should not ignore, Because getting even this much... Think of how many senators in the history of the United States have managed to get people to start drawing up designs for him to his specifications. Can you name a lot of them? I can't name any member of Parliament in the UK, even Winston Churchill when he was Lord of the Admiralty, trying to get the naval constructors to draw up designs to his specs without the Third Sea Lord and the rest of the board of the Admiralty agreeing? No, that's not going to happen. In the face of the absolute objection of the Navy? Definitely not. Tillman got it done in the face of absolute objection. That is something to consider. And if he had been alive longer, there is a chance he'd have got one of them built. I almost look at the designs and go, has he got some which are really absurd so he can give people the illusion of choice? Pick one. You have to build one. We know exactly what they'd all build. They'd order the Tillman 3. That's what they go for. But if you think about that, that means they're going for the almost the middle of designs. Because there's 4 designs, officially. Tillman 4 comes in 3 different variants. So theoretically, you've got 6 variants there. If Tillman sits down with the president, especially if it was a Democrat president, you know, this is a very powerful Democrat senator. If he sits down with you and goes, I've got this costed, I've got this plan, I've got this built, I've got the votes in the House and in the Senate, and I want this built. Are you going to object to it? You're going to fight it? The world would have been very different if Tillman had survived. I don't see a Washington Naval Treaty going through if he's managed to build his Tillman freeze. And definitely he will not let his ships be cancelled. If he wants them built, he wants them built. Because you can guarantee one of them, if not 2, are going to be built in Charleston. In his yard. You can guarantee that. That's the same as you can say the sun... We float a circle around the sun and you see it rise and descend every morning and every evening. You can guarantee 1, if not 2 of those ships will be built in Charleston. And there is no way, in any circumstances, under any kind of reality, that he would let them be cancelled. Pause or anything. Not unless a US Navy is planning to order all its cruisers for the next 20 years from the Charleston yard. So, yeah. Interesting gent. Really interesting gent. Hope you enjoyed this video. Take care. I normally do sometimes add questions on the end of videos, and I think for Tillman I'm tempted to do so, because bearing in mind the likely discussion was supposed to be about G3 N3s, and I don't think it will be the G3s and N3s. It would be the earlier designs which the British would jump off on the alphabet soup to. I'd like you to think about the earlier ones, not G3s and N3s, the other ones. I have covered them in various videos and I've talked about them. What you think the British might jump into of those designs, those other options. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. I think they'd also modify some of them. I don't think you would get a straight one. I think it would be 16.5-inch guns rather than 18-inch guns. Although they do have 18-inch guns available, so they might go for 18-inch. They might go for 18-inch, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting because they'll be looking at the 16-inch 50s and going, that range is interesting. They've got a 15-inch 50 under development. They've got a 16.5-inch 50 under development. They've got an 18-inch something under development. I'm fairly certain the original Mark 1, not the one which ends up on Furious, but the original Mark 1 was going to be a 42 cal. Like the 15-inch 42 and the 13.5-inch. I think the subsequent one they're working on is probably, considering the British were using built-up design at this point, it could well be a 45 to 50 cal. I think it could be 40. The British are doing a lot of work on 50 caliber guns post World War One. A lot of work. The 15-inch 50 is especially an interesting idea. That's the biggest change. If you want to have an interesting what-if discussion, what if the British go with the F3 design and the 15-inch 50 instead of Nelrod design, and what happens? Because the first thing I think that happens is that over the next 20 years, the Queen Elizabeth, the R's, Hood, Renown, Repulse are all upgraded with 15-inch 50s. And then I do not see grounds for a King George V coming in with 14-inch guns, because I'd just go for 15-inch. In which case you get a very, very different scenario going on. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and take care.